All righty. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Unbeliever. I'm going to have one of my favorite people on here today, Abby Cleckner, and we're going to talk about an article that she just wrote on the Bad Roman called Five Reasons to Not Vote. Um, I've had a really interesting experience over the last few months when it comes to voting. And when I read this article that Abby wrote, I wanted to get her on here and talk about it. So let me bring her in. Howdy.
Hi.
So, if you've watched any of the previous episodes, you've met Abby before. Abby writes for the Bad Roman, and she's written. What have you done? About 3 articles now, 3 or 4.
3 or 4.
Okay. So, was this particular topic just timely, or is this something that you have been really working on for the last, for a while? Obviously with election day coming up, it's timely. But what led up to you writing this article and getting the format that you have?
Yeah, so it's stuff I haven't voted since Obama was elected the second time. So it's been stuff I've been thinking about a good long while. But this article in particular, it's like it's an election year, might as well kind of organize everything in one place. And then I kind of I'd been outlining it for a few months, and then I was kind of in a rush at the end, like, oh, geez, better get this out before the election's over. Because really, my motivation was you are inundated all the time with propaganda about voting. And if you say you're not going to vote, people are kind of like, how dare you? So
Right.
So I just wanted to kind of normalize it and be like, there are good reasons to not vote. And it's not because you're crazy or lazy.
Back that microphone off just a little bit more for me. It's kind of
Sorry.
popping a little bit. That's all right. We're gonna do it live. We're doing it live. So I have had such an interesting experience. Well, as we all have over the last few months. Um, I had not. I was not registered to vote. I did register this year. I had some specific. It's kind of a project. It has been for me this year. Back in May, my wife drugged me kicking and screaming to a freedom rally that was up in Charleston, in the capital of West Virginia, and I just wasn't all about it. But I was curious, so the curiosity got me. So we drove up there, and there was literally like 10 people. I mean, it was, the West Virginians are just not all about going out and sticking it to the man. So there was like 6 cars, and we drive circles around the Capitol, and this was before masks even started, but there were voluntary masks at that time. It was recommended, and so we had people yelling at us from the sidewalk, "You're killing my grandma," and so we do that, and we went back up there a couple of weeks later, and this time there's like 40 people, and they've got a little microphone set up. And so I gave a little speech, and I didn't hold back. I mean, I didn't like, listen, I'm an anarchist, but I said a lot of the things that I would say. And so this guy walks up to me, and he's like, "Have you ever thought about running for office?" And I'm like, "Oh, hell no." There's no, absolutely not. I'm like, "Dude, I'm an anarchist. I don't run for office." Well, this guy's name is Marshall Wilson. My wife knew who he was because she had been very active with trying to get some homeschool legislation passed, trying to get some health freedom legislation passed that would give exemptions for vaccines. So she kind of knew a lot of the players involved in that. So she knew Marshall. So we get to talking. And because of that conversation, I had to ask some questions. I'm like, number one, how do you run for office? What happens when you do? What happens if you get elected? Just all these kind of questions. So I watched sessions of the West Virginia legislature for the first time in my life. I read the West Virginia Constitution for the first time in my life. Said to a friend of mine, told him that I did that. He goes, "We have a constitution?" And I'm like, yeah. Now, apparently nobody else has read it either. So I looked up this Marshall Wilson guy because I liked a lot of the stuff that he said. You know, he would fit in very well with most of us in some of our core beliefs. And I start researching him, find out that he is a delegate. He's in this legislature. He's the only independent. He got so crossed up with the Republicans because he just would not shut the hell up and do what he was told that he removed himself and became an independent. So I watched some of his stuff in the what he would say when he was up there, because I'm like, what's it look like when somebody kind of like us, similar to us, is actually in the government and says this stuff out loud? And it was very entertaining because they just looked at him like he just got off the alien ship. You know, like, what the hell is this guy saying? So I find an article from 2019 where he had said if the Republican challenger lost the primary to the Republican governor who was elected as a Democrat, he would run as an independent. Well, that guy lost. And so, standing by his word, he's like, well, I'm going to run. So then this hilarious nonsense ensued of trying to get on the ballot, couldn't get on the ballot. The Secretary of State, the governor screwed him. So he goes on a writing campaign. So we've been helping this guy. We've been, you know, I did an interview for him. I've done some media stuff for him. My wife's, you know, drove 100,000 miles delivering campaign signs. So it's been a very interesting look inside. Okay. And I've also seen a lot of people over the last, say, 4 months, most of which are very diehard Trump people, which kind of goes without saying. But they're asking a lot of questions. And I'm kind of sitting back like, I don't want to poop in their Cheerios just yet. You know, I want to, I've been very frank and I haven't really held back on anything, but getting to see the inside of this process and watching the thought process they're going through. Mm-hmm. And because they're obviously they believe in the process, or they did. They may not very much when this is over. But what has been interesting to me, and I think a lot of the points that you made in this article, a lot of these folks need to hear this. They see that there's a problem, which is a government overreach, an executive overreach. We can't deny that's happening, right? That especially on the local level now. We used to, really, up to this point, who the hell cared who the governor was? You know, everybody wanted to pick a president and whatever, pick your governor. They're just a mascot. Well, guess what? The mascot's now the football coach. You know, they got all the they got all the power, and we find out that over time, these local legislatures were putting in this Trojan viruses into the code that gave these governors this button to press, and now everybody's going, wait, what the hell just happened? So naturally, their first step is to vote. Well, in most cases, in the state of West Virginia, well, we'll just vote for the other guy. Well, the problem is the other guy is the other guy. Like, this governor was elected as a Democrat, couldn't get his budget passed because the Republicans controlled the legislature, so he just switched parties. Like 3 or 4 months in, he switches parties, and the Republican legislature goes, "Oh, we have a Republican governor now."
It's a magic trick.
It's magic. and so they have completely laid down. They won't challenge him. They won't say jack to him. They've been hiding in some cave. The judicial is completely out to lunch. We've sued and sued and sued, and they're like, well, I mean, we really don't think what the governor's doing is all that bad, because they're terrified. They don't want to be blamed if the governor's right. He's not, but if he was the governor, and the experts were all right, they don't want to take responsibility if they turn all this loose, and then bodies start piling up in the streets. So you have all of these people right now, and I think this is probably the greatest opportunity in the history of liberty. Like this what we're living now, I think, is 1776 times 1,000. This is the coolest time to be alive in history, and this time that we're living is going to be talked about for centuries. So I don't know what's going to happen Tuesday. I have my guesses. I'll go ahead and go on record. I think Trump wins 50-0. I think he's going to turn all the blue states red. Then the war really starts, because all of these rubes, these uneducated blobs that the elites can't comprehend are going to go out, and I think a lot of them are going to go vote for Trump just to spite him, just out of sheer spite, not because they think Trump's all that great.
Yeah.
I think, at least in West Virginia, we've done enough with this write-in deal that the governor's done. He's finished. Now, the Democrat guy may get in because of it, but this clown, we're going to send him packing back to where he came from. And I'm okay with that. So, having said all of that, let's go through this article. I'll go through, you've got 5 points. I'm going to go through them. We can kind of discuss as we go along. So let's start with number 1. Your vote really doesn't matter. This is really hard to swallow, because a lot of people are like right now, we're dealing with this write-in campaign. Well, if I write in this guy, what if the bad guy wins? Go ahead.
So, yeah, like on a state level, your vote has a higher level of statistical significance, but it's still in the overall picture basically insignificant. So there was 2 parts to that point, and that was the first one, that really statistically it's extremely, extremely rare for an election to be won by 1 vote. So if you stay home, it doesn't really matter. And then the second part is that really, no matter who ends up getting elected, the policies end up being the same either way. They kind of end up just being the face, but they don't really have the control. There's so many lobbyists and the deep state, which I'm not a deep state operative. Somebody accused me of that recently. There's so much that goes on behind that office, that if they're trying to stay in the office, they have to appease those people. So the policies are going to stay the same either way. And I think this is something that is really easy to get sucked into, this mindset of I'm just one person. Anything I do doesn't really make a difference, and I need to tap into something bigger than myself. That's what's really going to make a difference. And I think that's really completely false. If you need to be part of a group to make a difference, you're really kind of negating your individuality and ignoring the actual difference you can make in your everyday life and things that you do, like in reality, that like politics isn't what really changes the world, like everyday people and people who run businesses. Those are the people who are really making the difference in the world.
It's I think as humans, we understand. It's funny to me, I'm 44, and all my whole life I've heard about, well, you have to reject peer pressure. Peer pressure is bad. Now put on your mask, slave, and shut up.
Yeah.
Or you better go vote. I mean, I turned on I'm sitting here in a truck stop. I'm on the road, and You know, I watched like literally 5 minutes of a football game just waiting. Oh my God. It was one after another after another after another. And I switch over to the NASCAR race, and it's just vote, 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 vote. You know,
Yeah.
and what I really personally hate about the corporate media and the state is that they treat us like these brain damaged children. That
Mhm.
if not for their wise intervention, and then you have these elites that run these news organizations, this corporate media, and they just treat us like what? Well, if we don't tell them how to vote or when to vote, they're not going to because they're too stupid.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it's one thing, and I hate the among volunteerists and anarchists, if we become too militant, um, there are people that still, even beyond this election, are going to still believe in voting. And I'm curious to see what happens beyond that, because these people that I have now been in contact with that have really, dude, worked their butts off to try to get this guy elected, all volunteer, no money. I mean, if he gets elected, it's going to be a miracle. But I'm kind of curious to see what happens,
Mhm.
because, and I wrote this piece the other day, if voting is the only tool you're going to use, that's part of the issue.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, oh, well, I voted. Okay. Now, what else are you going to do? Because there's so much more meaningful action that can take place if you're a business owner that refuses to require masks or refuses to shut down. That is 1,000 times more effective than just voting alone. Okay, let's go to point number 2. You're propping up a system that you hate.
Yeah. So I feel like even the most hardcore statists that I know still think the system is broken, our government sucks. Everyone you talk to agrees that all politicians are liars, that they don't keep their promises, or you hear in every single election, well, we have to pick the lesser of two evils. And it's kind of like, at what point do you say none of this is working and we are not able to change it because it's functioning exactly how it was designed to, which is that taking advantage of regular people and the political elites are the ones who get all the benefits. Um, so so yeah, I think people are under the impression that the only thing they can do to change the system is to vote. And I'm saying, like you said, all of the commercials, all of the propaganda you get beaten over the head with every day, just tell you to vote. Just vote no matter what. It's just really important that you vote, because they don't really care who you vote for, because in the end, it doesn't really matter. The policies are going to be the same either way. The military industrial complex and big pharma and whoever has their way either way. They just need you to participate to legitimize it. Um, and I hate kind of saying that voting is giving your consent, because I don't think it's exactly the same thing. Uh, but I do think they need your participation to keep going. It legitimizes the whole system, and rather than saying, "Oh, I wish the slave master would whip me a little lighter," how about we say there shouldn't be slavery? Like, I think there's no point in trying to change the system because this is how it's designed to work. And I think also, like the the people who are kind of backing a third party and have their hope in that of like, oh well, maybe they don't even have to win. Maybe if we even get a significant percentage of the vote, it'll make a difference. But that's happened in the past. Ross Perot, I think, got like 18% when he ran as a third party. Um, I could be wrong about that, but it was
I'm
a
going to fact check you, Abby.
okay, go ahead. It was a significant percentage, and it was like after that election, everything just went right back to normal.
19%. Well done.
Oh, yeah, so there you go. So, yeah, it was pretty significant, but it didn't change the system whatsoever. And we haven't always had these same parties. There have been changes, and it doesn't really change the system whatsoever. Um, and even like with the impeachment of Trump and different things to try and get corruption out of politics, like if you think about back in like uh the Nixon administration, both his vice president and Nixon resigned because of their investigations for corruption. And, like, what do we have to show for it? Was it like, "Oh, yes, and that is where the system turned a corner and there was no more corruption in politics." Like, it really doesn't make any difference. The system is what it is. I think you can back it or you can look for real life solutions and trust in the power of the individual and what you can do in real life.
I just finished reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. It's fantastic. How that book is not required reading well, I know why it's not required reading, because there's no way in hell they want people to know the story of Malcolm X.
You can make it required reading for your homeschooled kids.
Exactly. And it will be. But here was a guy that stood up to even his own system. When he became this kind of radical black Muslim and really was not brainwashed, but he was a part of this movement under this Elijah Muhammad guy who turned out to not be a good guy. But Malcolm was so loyal and he ended up being loyal to the principle, right?
Mhm.
And so when he breaks away from the Nation of Islam and actually goes to Mecca and goes on the Hajj, and he's looking around going, wait a minute, well, there's blonde-haired, blue-eyed Muslims over here. And these people outside America are treating me like a human. And they're black and brown and yellow and Chinese and Hispanic, and they're all on the same print. And he was just blown away. And it's what's so sad about him being assassinated, because all of that happened in the last 18 months of his life, completely changed who he was.
Wow.
But y'all, the last 3-4 chapters of that book, it's as if nothing has changed. That the way the media treated him in 1964 and 1965 up until the point where he was murdered by his own people, not by the CIA, by his own people, they would twist and manipulate and change the narrative that he would go do something in a crowd like in Egypt, and they were all excited and clapping and shouting, and the American media is like, Malcolm X started a riot. It's like, are you serious? So the realization, just finishing that book yesterday, the realization of how the media in this country twist things is not changed in 6 decades. And Joe Rogan had Alex Jones on the other day, and Alex made this fantastic point. With all this drain the swamp stuff, and how Trump had cut off the lobbyists. He didn't want any influence from the lobbyists. Well, what he did effectively was turned every person around him into a lobbyist, because now the corporations are going for his son and his aides, and here, just to get an audience with the president. That system has not changed just because Donald Trump is in there. Now, look, I know there's a lot of people that are thinking the second term, he's really going to, he's just going to turn it up now because he don't have to. And hey, he might. He's an entertaining character, and I wouldn't put it past him to start like handing out pardons and doing all kinds of crazy stuff after this election.
He is unpredictable.
He is. And God, he's entertaining. I mean, but when I watched a bunch of the Democratic debates, and I'm looking at Tulsi Gabbard, and I'm thinking, well, yeah, I mean, her economic policies are a complete disaster like everybody else's, but God, what a just nice, decent human being. Well, we can't have one of those. So here, have this pedophile with dementia.
Right.
because Lord knows you can't have an articulate, well-spoken woman of color who has actually, principles and a spine and is not like a lizard person. We can't
Right.
have that.
It's so interesting because I would say that most of the people I know are more on the liberal side. And not a single one of them was hoping Biden would be the nominee. Like, I don't know if these people exist somewhere, but I don't know that anybody even thought he really had a chance. Um, so it does tell you something. It's like nobody wanted this guy, and yet somehow he got picked as the one. But then once he was chosen, I have seen many of my liberal friends say, well, it's more important we defeat Trump, and you
Oh
can't
yeah.
just stick to your principles so much that and it's like, "Oh my gosh, what have you been saying to Republicans electing Trump about their principles?" Like, I don't know, I is it better to blatantly ignore your principles than delude yourself into thinking you're not doing that? I'm not sure, but it's
Right.
been very interesting to watch.
I'm in, I don't, and that's the part of the reason that I call this podcast Unbeliever, is because I don't have any faith in the state. I don't have any faith in the system. It exists. And so I'm going to stand back and kind of observe what happens. And I am interested to see what happens if Trump goes like 50-0 or 48-2 or something, some just crazy landslide. What happens if this write-in guy gets in who says, I'm going to swear in, I'm going to turn around, and I'm going to have executive orders, and I'm going to vacate every one of Jim Justice's executive orders. Now, just as somebody that hates Jim Justice, I would love to see that. That would tickle me to watch that happen. But maybe he doesn't do it. And I've also tried to say, okay, guys, let's say Marshall gets in, right? And I've spent a lot of time with this guy, and I believe he's genuine. I believe he is who he says he is. But y'all, there's 134 people in that legislature.
Right.
And I guarantee you they will fight Marshall harder than they would fight their worst enemy.
Mhm.
Just because. How dare you come into our system and screw it up by being an independent and becoming governor? How dare you?
Right.
Um,
And they all have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo too, so
yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, it's certainly going to be entertaining to watch. There's no doubt about that. And if Trump wins, a lot of people are worried about violence. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Because if he doesn't have to worry about reelection and they start burning shit down, the National Guard will be in there in 5 minutes and it'll be over. Just done. You know, I, I'm not I'm not one of these rooting for violence either way. I'm just telling you, if you're worried about that, just don't worry, because I promise you they're going to squash that stuff in about 5 minutes, and then those kids will run back to their mom's basement and watch more Che Guevara videos. Um, so point number 3. Now this, Abby, you're really going to hurt a lot of people's feelings here. So let's just go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off and get it out of the way. Jesus rejected political power.
Yes. And I stuck this one in the middle, but I think it's probably my favorite one because the vast majority of Christians completely miss this in the Bible. Like, it's really pretty clear, but it's like when mainstream people think of Christians, they think of Trump supporters and like how important it is to legislate your morality on other people. So, yeah, again, there's two major things that tell us that Jesus rejected political power. The first one is the expectations for the Messiah, which I think this is pretty well known among Christians, but they don't put two and two together somehow. That the Messiah was really expected to be a political military leader who would kind of overthrow the people who had occupied Israel and make it a great kingdom again, and they would be independent. So at the time, when Jesus came around, that everybody was waiting for that to happen and very anxious, and there were people, ready to rebel against the Romans and overthrow them and all that kind of stuff. So We're really expecting the Messiah to do that. And I pointed out in the article, even John the Baptist, who was announcing that Jesus had arrived, it talks about him coming to Jesus and being like, "Are you the one who, or am I supposed to be looking for somebody else?" Because he wasn't at all what anyone was expecting, even John the Baptist. And then the other story I point to is when he is welcomed into Jerusalem with people shouting Hosanna, meaning that they were recognizing him as the Messiah and they were rejoicing in that. And then a week later, he's being crucified by the Jews for blasphemy, and the Romans, of course. But yeah, basically they were like, "You are not our political leader that we were waiting for. You must not be the real deal." And I think hindsight is 2020, and his followers came to understand after they had kind of abandoned him when he was being crucified, because they didn't understand what was going on, because that's not what they expected either. But after Pentecost and after he had risen, they came to realize what he was really doing was something much bigger than a political movement. It wasn't about the nation of Israel. It was about all of humanity and transforming hearts and bringing God's kingdom to earth rather than rising up an earthly kingdom to belong to God. Because they all belong to Satan, and his kingdom does not at all operate in the way the kingdoms of this world operate. So we can't join together with kingdoms of this world and be like, yeah, we're going to turn around for Jesus, because it will not work. It's like, that is not how God functions. He functions from serving from the bottom up, not from tyrannical power from the top down. And then the second thing is very blatantly obvious: Jesus's temptation in the desert. And Satan comes to him after he's been fasting for the 40 days and tempts him with food, or if you're the son of God, then fall and see if the angels will protect you and stuff like that. And one of the things is political power. Satan says, takes him up to a high place, it says, and shows him all the kingdoms of the world at once, and says, "I have the power to give all of these to you if you fall down and worship me." So that tells us, first of all, Satan does have ownership over all the kingdoms of the world. So that's kind of a big deal. And then also, Jesus rejected that. And I've heard people say that Satan was lying. It wasn't legitimate authority. He was just saying that to try and trick Jesus, I guess. But Jesus doesn't say, like, no, you don't have that power. He just says, I'm not accepting that. So I think it's clear there's no reason not to assume that Satan was offering something that he couldn't deliver. I think Jesus never said that. And then also, losing my train of thought here. The fact, that it, I think we kind of write it off as not a real temptation. Like, we can understand if you hadn't eaten in 40 days, someone offering you food would be a huge temptation. And I think we kind of don't understand as much the temptation of political power. And I'm not sure why that is, since people think voting is so important. They don't really think of that as political power, I guess. But I think it was a very real temptation for Jesus. I mean, you can imagine all the things that tempt us to be involved in the political system. Like, you can make change for the better. You can end mass incarceration. You can end the wars. You can put a stop to this and that. And of course, like, slavery was still going on at that time when Jesus was being offered political power and all kinds of horrible things. And I'm sure it was a very real temptation of Satan saying, you can have control of these kingdoms who are literally crucifying people on a daily basis. Wouldn't it be easier to do that instead of being crucified yourself? Yet Jesus still was like, nope, I'm not about that. And I have a totally different way that I'm going about this, and just squashed
I love the meme where Jesus is sitting like on the mountainside and he's got all the children and get people gathered around him, and he's talking about taking care of your neighbor, and somebody's like, well, why don't we just like vote for a government and have them take taxes and do it. And he's like, okay, I'm going to start over from the
Yeah.
beginning. I have a special kind of power where I can take my phone and I can type words on Facebook and hit post and make my pastor's phone ring. I posted one day that Jesus was killed by the state on behalf of racist, nationalist, religious people. And like instantly his phone rings. You know, of course, they're not going to come say anything to me. They're going to go try to bully him into fixing me. You need to get him in line, you know. And bless his heart. Gosh, I don't know how he's not thrown me out of his church yet. Now, I'll tell you this, though. In January, I had a conversation with someone that I love dearly who was trying her best to offer me correction on something I had put on Facebook that was a little on the edge. Since March, everybody's taken my reins off. Like I'm allowed to say anything I want. They've just completely turned me loose. Like just go get them, you know? So that's been nice that, you know, all this nonsense has really taken my chains off. Something you said there about that power where we're taught from little children to believe that the state is mystical and magical and omnipresent.
Yeah.
That, I mean, well, they wrote words down on paper and voted on it. So, I mean, it's fixed.
Yeah.
And I'm going, no, it's not fixed. I know you think it's fixed, but it's not. And so this will get into your next point where whether or not you have people, I'll use Marshall as an example. Okay. He's someone that at this point, I believe is genuine and sincere in his desire to wrestle the control of the executive and make it behave according to the Constitution. All right. I mean, that's what he wants to make the government act with customer service in mind. And I'm thinking, brother, I wish you the best of luck. You know, because we've all been to the DMV and they treat you like slaves, you know. So, but there is that's the crazy thing. Like there is a constitution. There is I use this example. I haven't worked this out yet, so I'll try it out on you. Let's say that the people of a district gather together and go to their representative, the person that speaks for them in the state, and says, we would like to have all people born in the month of March expelled from our region. Now he can say, or she can say, because it's stupid, you can't do that. Well, we are the people and you're our representative. Okay. So he goes to the government and says, I'm speaking on behalf of my people, wish to have people born in the month of March expelled. Now, maybe another representative comes up and says, you know, my people have been talking about getting rid of the people born in the month of March. So they put a bill in committee and bring it to the floor. And I mean, hey, everybody voted. Now all the people born in the month of March are expelled. Well, the governor's like, you can't do that. Veto. And they're like, well, but the people have spoken. We are duly elected representatives of the people, so we're going to override the governor's vote. Veto. Okay, well, now it's law. All people born in the month of March are now expelled. Well, then we have a court system. And the court system can come in and say, no, you can't do that. Unconstitutional, right? But we don't want to use the process. We don't want to use that system that we hate because we want one guy to be the king, to be here's what I want. We all get together and we've decided, and you go in there and you just shove it through. So this fundamental lack of understanding of how the process actually works, of how the system actually works, and then to be what are supposed to be sons of God and members and ministers of the kingdom, the real kingdom, and then you don't even understand how that works because you've been so brainwashed by this politically entangled view of the gospel. You know, it's a self. I was thinking, it's a cycling. and it just cycles over and over and over again. So let's go to point number 4. The people who get positions of power are always the worst possible choice. Well, that'll preach.
Yeah, I mean, just if you look throughout history, it takes a lot to get political power. Like you've been saying with Marshall, and he still probably doesn't have much of a chance to win because you really have to be entrenched with those in power to get anywhere, and you have to sell yourself and sell your soul, really. You have to owe people a lot of favors to get into those positions. So the system is just set up to reward the most soulless people with the least amount of integrity, the people who really don't stand for anything, or like you mentioned Tulsi, like she had the courage to stand up and talk about the war and how we needed to end US involvement overseas or reduce it. And like they got rid of her. Like you can't be an individual, you can't stand up for anything. You just have to kowtow to the status quo and what the power of a system of power in existence wants you to do for them, because ultimately the people who are in those what we view as positions of power are really just tools of the system themselves.
There have been times where I have said anyone seeking political office must have some sort of mental defect.
Yeah.
There has to be something wrong with you to believe, oh well, I mean, I'm the one. I'm the guy that's going to go up there and uh, and I'm gonna fix it. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, no, you're not. Now, I think it would be interesting as a troublemaker, which I'm pretty good at, to what would it be like now that I've seen how this process works, this write in, get yourself on the ballot. Like, what would it be like if you just had people that, ran on a campaign, vote yes for no? I'm just going to go up and vote no on everything. Doesn't matter what it is. Babies, puppies, teachers' pay raises, it doesn't matter. I'm going to vote no on everything. Like, what would that be like if you found, like in West Virginia, 134 people that would pay the $100 filing fee? And what if you did get elected? But the problem, here's the problem I have with this when it comes to integrity. If I were, I think in the district that I live in, the last time there was like 26,000 votes cast for the House, the seat in the House of Delegates. If I were to go to those people and present myself and say, okay, I'm going to go be your representative and your voice, and here's what I'm going to do, and here are my principles. Well, then I'm not really representing them. I'm representing me, and I'm trying to go get, so I have kind of an integrity issue there, because I'd love to go up there and just cause trouble, and just vote no on everything. And I guess if I could get enough people to say, yeah, I'd like to see somebody go up there and just throw a wrench in everything, I guess it would be legitimate. But back to the example, if I'm truly going to be the representative of the people, I thought about this the other day. You see all these people that they're in love with the justice system, and they want to see it deliver justice, whatever that means. And so we see a lot of times, a cop can just blatantly beat the crap out of somebody, and they're like, well, you should have done what you're told, And I would like to say, guys, just keep this one thing in mind. If you're ever accused of a crime you did not commit, I want you to just think about the fact that a jury of your peers is going to be pulled from the comment sections you see on Facebook. Those are the people that are going to decide whether or not you get locked up in a cage or die. That's like that breaking that began for me 10 years ago when I started really questioning, should the state be allowed to do certain things? Should it be allowed to kill? Should it be allowed to lock people up? And then when you see where if you're indigent and you get a court appointed attorney, well, your court appointed attorney don't get the same resources that the prosecution does.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get some wet behind the ears, fresh out of law school guy that has no clue what they're doing. They're going to get paid next to nothing to defend you. And then you have this giant state with unlimited resources and detectives and cops and you're done. There's no way. And then you're going to go into a jury of your peers that are made up of these clueless, brainwashed people that we find on Facebook in these comment sections. Whew. Man, I sure as hell hope I never get accused of anything because I don't have the money or the resources to defend myself against that.
Definitely. Yeah. And no one knows about jury nullification. And a lot of people don't even get that far because the prosecution, purposely to avoid the cost of a trial, will load you up with charges and be like, hey, if you just take a plea deal, all this can go away. But there are consequences to that, being labeled a felon for the rest of your life. And a lot of people get caught up in the system when they're really young and kind of don't really know everything that's going to happen to them. And yeah, it's a mess. It's a huge, horrible mess. I hate the justice system.
Here's a conversation that I think needs to take place in the anarchist voluntarist community. Because for me, being an anarchist means that I'm an unbeliever. It means that I don't find faith or hope or comfort in the state. Okay. Yeah. That I'm not looking for it to bring me any kind of prosperity, safety, or security. However, you just mentioned jury nullification. Well, if I'm not registered and I can't get pulled into jury duty, then I can't nullify. If I just completely say, okay, well, yeah, I'm an anarchist, unbeliever, voluntarist, whatever you want to call it, and I'm just not going to participate. Well, then that means that there are people that aren't going to have access in these cases where maybe we could interfere. So I'm really not fully comfortable with my own position yet.
Yeah.
On how much influence could I have as being someone that is in the jury room and refuses to convict, or is in the jury room and says, well, I mean, I hear all they say, but let's just nullify the law. Well, what's that? Yeah. Well, let me tell you, or if I don't go up there and run for office and be a part of the system as a means of not fixing it, not helping it, making it better, but destroying it from the inside. That's a conversation. It's just not black and white. And there's too many people that I see in this movement that are way too black and white on this issue. Certainly we can influence our friends and neighbors, and we should. But I think there's a little bit of hypocrisy there, maybe. Oh, well, you go involve yourself in the process, but I'm not going to at all. I'm not completely sold on the proper course.
Yeah, I hear that. I get what you're saying, and I also would say I am not super black and white. I'm not gonna be super judgmental over someone who wants to keep voting. I kind of feel like if you're really taking it seriously, it'll become obvious to you that that is not working for you. As far as jury nullification, I think it's a lot more effective as understanding the concept than actually playing it out in reality, actually. And I say that because, first of all, if they hear you mention jury nullification, you're off the jury. You can't explain to other people what you're doing. It has to be completely in secret. And then second of all, if you are successful in nullifying a jury, all it is a mistrial and they get a new trial. So it's not like they go, oh, okay, you're not guilty. They just get a new trial. So I think if we can make people understand, like grasp mentally that laws can be unjust, which seems obvious, but people really don't understand that. They think, well, if you broke the law, you broke the law, and you know the consequences. And so if the state wants to lock you in prison for the majority of your life for having some kind of substance in your pocket, well, then you broke the law. And I think I think we can have a lot more influence if we can get people to see, like, well, no, most laws are unjust. And I think a good way to point that out too is to say to people like, "Okay, tell me all the laws that you're supposed to be following right now." And nobody can do that because it's impossible. Nobody knows what all the laws are. We just follow natural law naturally because maybe we're moral people, but also we don't want to experience the consequences of initiating violence or theft or anything like that. Um, so I think it's eye-opening that we don't really need laws for people to live together in a cooperative society. And I think convincing people of that is going to have a lot more power in the long run than trying to get it on a jury and nullify.
Yeah, it's we probably, the biggest argument in favor of the voluntarist anarchist position is to educate people, like you're saying, is that's going to be a lot more effective. You know,
Mhm.
um, I was having a conversation during breakfast at this truck stop, and we were talking about the history of the shipping industry, and something popped into my head from that Malcolm X book. And I said, well, I just finished reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, and this black dude over there, he went, what? You know, um, so many, I mean, the amount of content that I have consumed over the last decade probably dwarfs a lot of PhDs. We with podcasting and with audiobooks, and I saw a homeschooler the other day. And of course, we've got all these accidental homeschoolers now because of COVID. And they're like, well, my son won't sit and read a book. I'm like, I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
But I've probably read 400 now.
Yeah,
So
I
calm
think
down.
how much I hated reading when I was in
Oh,
high school and how resentful of it I was, and college. Like, you're just like, "Oh, this how fast can I get through this stupid bull crap?" And but now I read all the time. Like, I can't get enough. Like, when it's about something you're interested in and you're self-motivated, that makes a world of difference.
yeah. Well, so here's another nugget from this Malcolm X autobiography, which I found just fascinating. He quit school after the eighth grade, moves to Boston, ends up in the nightlife. So he's like 15 years old, already hustling, and he's dancing and he's selling drugs and he's doing all this stuff. And it wasn't, that went on for about 7 years until he was arrested and he went to prison. And he said that, he had a working vocabulary of maybe 200 words. And most of that was slang, jive, and profanity. Um, could barely read or could barely write. He could read pretty well, but he could barely write as far as like composition. And of course, he's in prison, so he's got nothing better to do. And he begins to read and read and read and read and read. And so this guy who you can go look up videos, this unbelievably articulate, motivated world speaker had like 5 to 7 years of self education. I mean, it's just unbelievable what he was able to do by locking himself. Well, he was locked up, but uh, having access to those books in that library and just voracious appetite for learning. And I have found, over the last 10 years, the more I have sought to understand that's connected me to more people who also seek to understand. And I think that's why I have such a positive view of the future. I was thinking the other day, I do not, other than like a sporting event, a NASCAR race or a football game or something, I do not consume network television ever. I don't watch it for entertainment. I don't watch it for information, but I do watch YouTube. I get my entertainment from YouTube. And it's like if I could put together clips of stuff that I consume in a week from YouTube and social media and lay that out, it would far dwarf what most people consume from corporate news and corporate entertainment.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan is such a powerful force right now. The people that he'll sit down and have these long form conversations with is just fascinating and amazing. So,
Yeah.
all right, let's hit point number 5. All political power is illegitimate. You own yourself.
Yeah. So I think this obviously Larkin Rose is a huge influence on this point. But just the idea that there are no sorry, my dog is going crazy. I texted my kids to do something. But just the idea that there are no people with magical powers who have the right to rule over you, who have the right to kill you, who have the right to lock you in a cage. They're just regular people. And if you stop believing that they have magical powers, then it just kind of disappears. Because another argument I've heard a lot is like, well, somebody's going to be president or somebody's going to be governor. So wouldn't you rather have influence over who it is? And it's like, yes, somebody is. But if you don't believe that that means anything or that they don't have any legitimate power, then like, who really cares? Like, yeah, somebody is going to be the owner of some company in North Dakota that I will never interact with. Yeah, I don't care who it is. Do whatever you want. Like like I'm never going to meet these people. They have no idea I even exist. I don't believe in their power. I don't care who they are. It doesn't matter. And I think believing nobody has legitimate authority over you is a big thing, and it's harder to wrap your head around than you would think. I That's another thing that we're trained from the time we're babies to look for who's in charge and who's making up the rules and who can I tattle on if something is not going the way I like. And so that's the other big thing of like you recognize that you have ownership over yourself, but that also means that everyone else owns themselves and you don't have the right to make decisions for them. You don't have the right to get somebody with a gun to come to their house and tell them to do anything. If you wouldn't do it yourself, then it's still not okay, even if a police officer is doing it or a border agent is doing it. Can you even imagine, like, people on the right who are so anti-immigration, who are like, well, if you didn't want your babies to be taken from you and locked in cages, I guess you shouldn't have crossed the border. Like, oh my gosh, how can you be so calloused and so removed from humanity that you could ever make any excuse for that being okay? But because some government agent is doing it, that magically makes it all okay. Something that these people would never in a million years do themselves.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we see it with, since we have been homeschoolers now for about a decade and being in that community of radicals and, um, you know, we have seen instances where some nosy neighbor would call CPS on a family
Yeah.
and, you know, oh, well, they they called CPS. They must have been doing something wrong.
Mm.
No, they actually weren't doing anything wrong. Just this idiot neighbor decided they must be doing something wrong because they're not doing things the way I think they should be doing them. And so, therefore I'm going to involve the state and its destructive force. And then of course they show up at the door and you're like, you're not coming in here without a warrant. Well, what do you mean? I have authority. No, you don't. You don't have authority. You think you do. I appreciate that you think you do. Um, and I had a conversation back in May which seems like a freaking lifetime ago.
It
My
does,
wife and I,
isn't it
our
crazy?
anniversary is May 8th. And Governor Fat Bastard had changed the rules to allow outdoor dining. Well, there's this restaurant that we like that has a big open patio. And I called him on Tuesday, and I'm like, hey, because we were going to drive to Georgia. You know, at that point, I'm like, we are eating in a restaurant on our anniversary. And I already had the one in Georgia picked out. You know, it was 500 miles. I'm like, hell, I can be there in 8 hours, you know? So they made this change, and I called the restaurant, and I said, are we good? They yep, we're good. Just be here about 4 o'clock. I walk in at 4 o'clock. She says, are you here for a pickup order? And I said, nope, I'm going to eat here. And she was like, well, and I'm like, well, the ABC, the alcohol beverage people just showed up and ran off all of our customers, threatened to take our liquor license. So my wife has a video on her phone of me calling the ABC people and telling them what I thought of them. And he told me I couldn't talk to him that way. And I told him I just did. He ought to get over it. But we're seeing now, even this, I was in Nebraska Thursday, and out in the middle of nowhere, like way out. And I'm thinking, I'm so far out in the woods, I've got to go into a Menards and buy some 2x4s. And of course, you know, they got all the mask signs, and I ignore them. I've ignored them in 19 other states. Why not this one? So I walk in, I'm walking around, and I can't find what I'm looking for. And I see this woman that works there. And I asked her where his product was. Do you have a mask? And I said, no. And she goes to hand me one. So I pulled one out of my pocket and made chin diaper. And she's like, put it over your mouth. So I put it up to here, you know, and she's like, put it over your nose. And I said, where is the product? So she takes me to it, and she's like, you're going to have to put that over your nose, and they're not going to check you out. And I'm like, have a nice day. So I get to check out, and this enthusiastic young man is like, I'm like, boy, you're awful nice. And he's like, yeah, you run into her, didn't you? And I said, yep, sure did. Because it gives these people with illegitimate power and authority, and they think, oh, well, I'm going to make your life a living hell because I can. And until a bunch of these restaurateurs and barbers and cosmetologists, and I am pretty confident they'll never get away with this again like they did in March. I think there were a lot of people that were kind of lulled into, well, the experts said, and we should. I mean, it's only 15 days. What can 15 days hurt 290 some days later? I don't think they'll ever get away with that again. I like they're doing it in Europe right now. And those unarmed fools will put up with it, but I think the Trump train that was chasing Biden's bus the other day will probably show up. And did you see that?
I heard about it a little bit.
Oh, it was hilarious. So there's like a Biden-Harris bus where was it? Somewhere in Texas. Of course, it's in Texas. So the Trump train with all their flags, they're like escorting the Biden bus out of town. And so the media are like, they tried to run it off the road. And I'm like, no, they did not. Okay. Would y'all please stop? It's just, God, what a time to be alive.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. Now
I feel like every day I'm surprised. Like not good surprises, but every day I'm like, really? Okay, this is the world we're living in. All right. Well, we'll see what happens tomorrow, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I just saw Governor Cuomo in New York has come up with a new plan. You know, that if you're going to come into New York, you have to be tested and proved, which is, you know, they're trying to they want us all to have digital passports. That's what they're after. You know, that's part of the Build Back Better plan. You know, and so the comment section is filled with sycophants that are, well, yeah, that's what we should be doing, and people should have to prove that they're not they don't have the virus, and I'm like, y'all, I've been going in and out of New York for 10 months. You know, I mean, now I kind of wish they would put barriers up on the interstates. That would be awesome. If they would put barriers up on the interstate, and all right, now where's proof of your test? You know, are you a non-resident? Are you from a hot spot? Now, number one, they don't have the resources and the infrastructure to pull that off. But I wish they would, because it would clearly illustrate how it wouldn't last 5 minutes and all hell would break loose.
Yeah.
But I try to remind myself that so much of what these governors are doing is because they legitimately believe this is what the people desire. And they're so disconnected from reality. And that's why I think Trump, that's why I think it's going to be such a blowout with Trump, because even if they're trying to send out, 80 million write-in, or what do you call them? Mail-in ballots to dead people. Y'all, I wish you the best of luck, because you have poked a bear that's been asleep for a very, very, very long time. And the bear woke up and went, Trump or Biden? Okay, Trump. They're not thinking about geopolitics. They're not thinking about liberal versus conservative policies. They're like, oh, so those people don't like Trump? Yes. Oh, well, then I'm going to vote Trump. They're like, they're not talking about philosophy and economics. They don't know who John Maynard Keynes is. They're clueless, but they're very pissed off right now, and so I just think it's going to be hard. So let's hit You Own Yourself, because I ended up in this YouTube vortex. YouTube leads you down these rabbit holes. And I watched this debate on polygamy and polyamory, and the Christian response to it. Swingers and all kinds of deviant sexual behavior. Keith Giles actually got pulled into this. I found a podcast where Keith was interviewed by this Consenting Adults podcast. It's really good. It's really fascinating to hear him address this. But
I bet it is. I've never listened to a podcast Keith Giles was on and didn't go with like, man, he's so awesome.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. So the thing is, polyamory, polygamy, swingers, multiple partners, open marriages, yada yada yada. Well, obviously, church people just lose their minds. They're like, you can't do that, because heaven's going to open and the world's going to split and we're going to fall into hell. But it comes down to consent. It comes down to I don't know if you're aware of her. There's a lady named Jessica Smith. She goes by Voluntary L on Twitter. She wrote this fascinating piece years ago on morality, and it was talking about consent. She used the example of like two boxers. If they get into the ring voluntarily and beat the crap out of each other, they're completely moral. There's nothing immoral about that. So in this conversation about all of these alternative sexual things, I'm thinking, okay, well, this comes down to self-ownership and contract.
Yeah.
If you're in a traditional marriage like I am, and you probably are.
Yeah.
If I engage in that kind of behavior, there's going to be consequences unless I renegotiate the contract. Now let's just go ahead and settle. If I walk up to my wife and I say, hey, I was thinking about trying out polyamory, that's a no-go. Like that we don't even need to have that conversation. Okay. But if you start at the beginning, and in the beginning of that contract is, well, here's the things that I like to do, and here's the people I like to do it with. And if you're both okay with it,
yeah,
it's nobody else's business. So, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I own my body. Well, I took that one step further, and I'm like, I own my body. My wife does not. Now, she has access, right? But I can't say that she has ownership, because she can't walk up and say, well, I'm going to chop your arm off.
Yeah.
No. Well, I own it. No, you don't. No, that's a serious boundary. Well, I own half of your body, so I'm going to shoot you in the head. No, you're not. And so vice versa. Like, I still have self-ownership. I still have the very last boundary possible that says, no, you're not going to do that to me. Doesn't matter who you are. no matter where you came from, no matter what you think and what kind of authority you think you have, when you get to this last boundary of me, I'm the sole owner. I'm the person that decides what happens with it, what I ingest, and
Yep.
you have absolutely no authority over my body.
Right.
And I
And,
think
like, your
that's
wife, who has the most claim out of anyone on earth, even if you were like, "Yeah, I'm gonna start being polyamorous," um,
then
there
she
would be
will start cutting stuff off.
there will be consequences. I would argue she still does not have the right to physically lock you in a cage or
Right.
start cutting stuff off. Like, that still violates your self-ownership. She doesn't have a right to do that to you. And so how much more any kind of member of the state having a
Right.
right to lock you in the cage because you ate or smoked something, like, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, and we're seeing it now with, I mean, the vaccinations are coming,
Yeah.
it's just a matter of time. And what I find so fascinating about that, especially among the more progressive deconstructed types, you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, I'm saying that there are people and principalities on this planet that I'm going to say, no, you can't inject me with that, right?
Mhm.
And how some of these folks are like, oh, yes, you will, because the expert said, and I'm like, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 I
You
won't.
just have
And
to believe science. Why don't you believe science?
shut up, slave. It's science. That to me, it's like I can understand we can have a really fascinating dialogue about the science
Yeah.
of of the chemical makeup and the responses and the reactions. But when I say, yeah, but I'm not going to allow corporations that are literally exempt from liability to inject chemicals into my body against my will, and they're like, "What? Yeah." And I'm thinking, I've got idiocracy, Brondo. It's got what plants crave. Um, that to me is fascinating. How people who claim to be so woke will begin to start shilling for multinational corporations to have blanket immunity.
Right.
Uh, and then if they do harm you, your neighbor has to pay the bill. That's I mean, I'm sitting in a truck right now that's capable of weighing 40 tons, traveling at 75, 80 miles an hour. If this truck's fully loaded at 80,000 pounds and I hit you, you're dead. I mean, there's no question. But I don't see anyone going, well, you shouldn't drive that truck because you might hurt somebody. I, yeah, yeah. So you take precautions. I'll take precautions,
Yeah.
and we'll drive down the same road at the same time, giving one another space as necessary, being courteous to one another. I'll stay out of your way, you stay out of my way, and everybody's fine. But and I the only what does Adam Curry calls them? He calls himself a conspiracy therapist. He's not a theorist. He's a therapist. The only one that I will give into at all is that when this Build Back Better stuff started, have you seen this?
Not
Build Back.
really. I try to
Okay.
pay attention as little as possible.
Okay. If you go into YouTube and search Build Back Better, a bunch of Biden Harris stuff will pop up. But also from the IMF and the World Health Organization and the Prime Minister of Canada and the PM of Britain and people in New Zealand. And it's just, oh, we're going to build back better, build back better, build back better. When I first heard it about 4 months ago, I'm like, oh, okay, so they're all on the same page. They all have this build back better plan. Well, turns out Build Back Better goes back to about 2010 and the Clinton Foundation. Imagine
Mm.
that. So I think 2020 was going to happen exactly as it was going to happen. All this was supposed to go down this way. If you remember, Dr. Fauci back in January of 17 said this administration will face a pandemic like 2 weeks before Trump was elected, he knew it was coming. I think Hillary was supposed to be in power. And then we'll Build Back Better and Great Reset, and we're all going to, everybody, it's just kumbaya, and then, all of these stupid rednecks voted for Trump and screwed up the plan, and now their Build Back Better plan was all in, and now they're going to do it again. So I don't think it's a conspiracy per se. It's just a convenient opportunity for these people, because they're already saying, of course, the American media will never cover this, but they're saying out loud that lockdowns, these lockdowns work really well. You know what else would be good for? Climate change. We need to lock everybody down to drop the greenhouse gases, and we're going to fix climate change. And I'm thinking, no, it's not going to happen. I wish you the best of luck.
Lock down all the military jets and tanks. I think that'll make more of a difference than me driving to work, right? But nobody ever.
How dare you?
That's not an option.
How dare you? That's you're ungrateful, unpatriotic. You're just a terrible person, Abby. I just can't believe you said that. Well, we live in a fascinating time. Your article was so on point in so many ways. I'm not going to hate on anybody that goes and votes. I will challenge them if that's where all their hope is.
Yeah.
These trucks have these red lights up here, and I'm like, why is my freaking nose so red? And I had to turn that off because I couldn't take this big bozo nose anymore. I digress. I'm not going to hate on people for voting, but if that's all you have, if that's the only thing you're prepared to bring to the table is to just vote, because I went and did it, and it literally took 5 minutes. I'm sorry, that's not enough effort. Yeah. If you're truly passionate about human liberty, which includes people in other countries too, if you're truly passionate about human liberty, then there's a whole lot more for you to do than just go in and push some buttons on a screen. Yeah. That's the challenge really that I want to issue. Turn off the news, open a book or 12, learn some history. It's.
And I would also say, like, if you are going to be significantly emotionally affected based on the outcome of this election, you're going to be terrified, or you're going to be elated, or you think the world is going to change in any way, then that's a signal that your hope is in the wrong place, and you need to kind of reflect on that, because whatever happens in any election, it's not going to save your life. It's not going to ruin your life. Yeah. Focus on what's and that's who are actually in your life, who you will meet on a day-to-day basis.
I can truthfully say that it would be fun or interesting if my friend became the governor. That would be interesting. But I have no hope in it. None. Mm-hmm. I have no hope in, now if Trump does win big, am I going to be entertained? Oh, you bet your sweet ass. I can't. I mean, that is going to be fun, because to watch these people, like we saw them before, they're screaming and crying, and all those people in Javits Center waiting on Hillary to be coronated, and they're just boo-hooing and bawling, and I'm going to laugh at your pain. I really am. I'm not going to find any hope in it. Regardless of who it is.
And I think it's a great opportunity too, when we come back to the voting issue of how many people give me crap for not voting. It's like, okay, so now, especially if you've been through several election cycles where the person you voted for hasn't won, or even if the person you voted for has won and they haven't done the things that they said they would, which I think if you're actually paying attention would be every single one. really think about that. So what do you think about voting? Did your voting help you? Is avidly voting in every election gotten us into the mess we're in right now? So, like, yeah, I think it's a good opportunity to point those things out. Like, yeah, you voted and all the same problems still exist. So what now? Oh,
I don't know where this is from. I've seen memes made out of it, and I found this guy laughing, and it's somebody put it together on YouTube for 10 hours laughing, and I may like that guy.
that's Spider-Man.
Oh, is that what that's from?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It's just this guy laughing for 10 hours, and I think I'm going to stream it if Trump wins on Tuesday night. I'm just going to turn that on and just stream it for like 2 hours. Just because let's end it here. Let's look at the reality. Let's say Trump wins. If you think it's over, I have some unfortunate news for you, because it's not over. It's only just begun. If my friend Marshall wins, that's one battle in a very long war because if you think they're going to be like, oh, okay, well, Trump won, I guess we'll go home now. No, that's not going to happen.
Trump is on their side, so it doesn't matter.
Right. Well, how dare you? Sorry. Look, he's an interesting character. He's entertaining.
I agree. I think he's been great for showing how ridiculous and useless the office of the presidency is, making people take it less seriously. I think that's a really big triumph. That I appreciate Trump for that, at least.
Well, and again, I am so thankful that we have the internet. Yes, Facebook and Twitter and YouTube are being unfortunate in some of their choices.
Yeah.
But y'all, I mean, the technology is here. The decentralized technology is here. And it's only a matter of time.
Everyone will move on to the next thing.
Right.
Which is happening.
Yeah. And we are so close to decentralized networks, decentralized autonomous organizations, decentralized social media. It's so close. I wish we could press the button and have it right now.
Yeah.
But watching how they are, I mean, it's so fun. And I don't remember who it was said it. Imagine if Donald Trump, if there was a laptop that had dirt on Donald Trump Jr. In existence right now. Well, it's all you talk about. They're so, how do they not see that? Are they so blinded by their self-righteousness that they literally can't see how foolish they look as they shut down the New York Post, and cut off the president's, what's her name? The Kaylee chick, okay. You're digging your own grave.
Yeah.
Yes, it's your platform and you can do whatever you want to with it. I'm going to be surprised if this video makes it. I don't think, I'm recording this as we go because I don't think they're going to let this stand, with the things that we've said in here.
Yeah.
We'll see, but
we'll see.
That's why I'll put it on BitChute, and LBRY. So, well, anyway, wonderful conversation. Great article. I loved it.
Awesome. Thanks.
I figured I'd just have you on here so Craig wouldn't, just scream about voting the whole time we were on here. Love you, Craig. Well, you can find episodes of Unbeliever on all the podcast platforms. Go to, put that up here, thebadroman.com, and you can find more content from Abby and Craig and all the rest of the heretics over there at the Bad Roman that'll teach you all kinds of bad stuff that people don't want you to know. So thanks for being here, Abby. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. It was great.